this video, I'm going to share the story of how I grew up feeling a bit of a misfit and how I went to a workshop that completely changed my life. So from when I was a little girl growing up in Wales in the 1970s, I knew that I was a bit different from other kids. I seemed to think about things and worry about things and daydream about things that just didn't cross my friends' minds. So like once we went on a school trip to a country fair, and I remember we all entered a raffle for a pony and we were all very excited, except that as the afternoon wore on before the raffle was drawn, I remember just starting to really worry about what was going to happen if I won. Where would we keep the pony? How would we afford to be able to feed it? And I made myself so ill that I had to go to the St John's ambulance tent, where I told them that I had a headache because I knew that it was a bit weird to say that I was worried about winning this pony. I didn't win it, you'll be glad to know. And I used to worry about things when I was really little, like 4 or 5, about how was I going to learn to operate a washing machine when I was a grown-up, or I'd watch my mum knowing exactly where to get the bus from in the busy bus station and think, oh, how am I ever going to learn that when I'm grown up? As I grew up, the library was my friend. There was no internet in those days, so if you were a curious kid who wanted to know about everything, then the library was, your spiritual home. I can remember getting into a few arguments with my mum about taking books places. Obviously she didn't mind me reading, but she didn't want me taking a book on every single countryside walk or shopping expedition. And I remember one time she called up to me one evening after I supposedly had my light out because she could smell burning, and when I looked up I realised that I had burnt a hole in my dressing gown by putting it over my light so that she wouldn't see the light underneath the door. So yeah, I had all these very strange eclectic interests. I'd go to the library and I'd read about pinhole cameras and graphology and I Ching and dream interpretation, and yet when it came to choosing what to do after school, I listened to the well-meaning adults in my life who suggested that I should use my brain. I'd done well at school, and I should use my brain to get a sensible career. So that's how I found myself studying law at Oxford University, where everyone else just seemed to be better at being like a normal, nearly adult human being than me. I didn't know whether it's that they didn't have the strange, quirky thoughts that I had. I thought they probably did, but that they were just much better people than me, that they had this kind of character that allowed them to keep themselves in check and not come out with the random stuff that I did. But yet some of my quirks would still come out no matter how hard I tried to repress them. So I would find myself doing handsprings across the quad, or sitting making a daisy chain on the same quad for like half an hour while I daydreamed in the sunshine. So I'm somehow muddled through my 20s as a corporate lawyer, taking refuge in obscure New Age bookshops and wine bars, and by having things like beautiful flowers on my desk, which I would keep quiet about, the joy they gave me to my fellow lawyers. I would also keep quiet about things like the way the birds singing in Finsbury Circus uplifted me. And I definitely didn't tell them that I would go home and do chakra opening meditations after work. So yeah, I managed to do a fairly good job of toning myself down to becoming the kind of person that I thought that was palatable to society, what people wanted from me. But what that meant was that when I was in my early 30s and I was suddenly thrown into life as a new mum of an intense baby, I had no real support network, because the other mums that were in my NCT group just didn't seem to have the same issues that I did. They effortlessly got their perfect seeming babies into routines, and they'd sit around chatting while I was on the verge of a meltdown half the time. And when I did try to reach out for support to them, I could see they would sort of back off from the intensity of my emotion and try and steer the subject round to safer topics like how to sterilise equipment for weaning, and whether mummy and baby yoga classes would help them get back into their pre-pregnancy genes more quickly. But at least um, parenthood gave me the chance to jack in the very unfulfilling legal career, and I retrained as a cognitive hypnotherapist, where I started to find a few kindred spirits. But the trouble was, my ex-husband and I had, for some reason, decided to move to this affluent county in England, Surrey, which was full of very conventional, yummy mummies who would sit around with their little children, nicely playing with each other while they had cups of tea or glasses of wine. And meanwhile, my two children were climbing the walls or having meltdowns or fighting with each other or other children. And I just didn't fit in. Along the way, I had started to come across a few reasons why I was different from other people. So I learned about introversion, and I realised that we introverts are in the minority and that we can struggle in our extrovert-centric Western society. And when I read Elaine Aron's book about highly sensitive people, I really resonated and identified as one. But neither of those things offered a complete picture about what was going on with me or my sensitive yet loud, feisty, boisterous children. And my youngest son in particular really struggled with emotional regulation to a degree that, as any parent would, I just kept looking for ways, for answers about what was going on to see how I could support him. And by the time he was 8, we'd been to about 6 different professionals. We had one diagnosis of sensory processing disorder, but it just didn't offer a complete picture, so I kept looking. And then one day I saw a flyer for a workshop, and on the cover of it said, intense, sensitive, reacts out of proportion. And I thought, my gosh, that's him. So I went along to the workshop, and I'm so glad I did. That workshop changed my life. I sat there hearing this model intensity, or overexcitability as it's sometimes known, described, and I had tears, I can still remember, brimming in my eyes, because not only was the lady who was running the workshop describing my son, in fact both my children, but also me. And as she talked about this approximately 20% of the population who experience life through the lens of intensity, in other words, we notice, we're aware of things that other people aren't, and we have strong reactions to them because we have these hardwired personality traits that mean that we're just more sensitive and intense. As I listened to that, I heard myself described, and the sense of validation was just visceral. I had never felt so fully seen and understood. It was incredibly moving. I went home and I had a completely different listening for my children and myself. I'm not saying that life since then has been plain sailing. Of course, there have been challenges. I'd like to tell myself that when you have intensity, you'd be bored by a regular life anyway. But whatever challenges I faced along the way, I have been able to meet much, much more easily because I have the compassion and the self-understanding and the free energy that I just didn't have when I was using up so much energy to repress who I was. And I had the understanding that the good things that I love about myself, my empathy, my imagination, my strange sense of humour, come as part of this intensity package. So I couldn't have my challenges or my strengths without one another. So since then, I have made it my mission to share this knowledge with other people. It's not widely known, and one of the reasons I think that is because it can look so different from person to person. So psychologists have identified 5 types of intensity, and you can have just one or all 5, but most people have got a combination of several of them, and they can look really different. So what I encourage you to do, if you resonate with anything that I've said, is to find out more about the intensities. You can watch my videos, or you can read the information on my website. And you'll probably start to notice a pattern emerge, which will take you towards your intensity profile. If you'd like to find out more, you can visit my website, www giraffe-life.com. Thank you for watching. I'd love to hear from you.